Hi, so today, this is chapter 15, and I'm going to answer these questions. How do viruses affect our body? Another one was viruses are living organisms. Why do viruses have beautiful colors, and how do they spread? And how many viruses are in the United States? So, how do these things affect our body? Now, this is pretty cool because... and the reason this is cool is we've talked about different parts of the body and the cells that are in different parts of the body. And so if we start with that, and so you have a human body, with feet and hands and a head, fingers, eyes and nose, mouth, maybe a butt. But, kind of looks like a bird man. But anyway, you have different cells here, 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 here. All these are different cells. The cells in your nose are different than the cells on the bottom of your feet, and they both have a different function. One is to maybe have a thick cuticle, and the other one's to have a thin cuticle, like your nose, so you can get oxygen in through your sinus cavities. So they're different cells, and so one might be like this, and the other cell might look like this, right? And so when a virus comes in your body, what it does is we talked about that the outside of both of these types of cells have proteins on them. They have like a little fingerprint. It lets everybody know that this is the bottom of the foot and this is in the nose. And those proteins look like something like a fingerprint or a face. And so when a virus comes in, if we were to draw like a crude virus, a virus is coming along, and then its proteins down here need to match the proteins where it needs to land. And that's why viruses, you'll get a sore throat. And why don't you get a sore armpit? Well, that's something different. But, the one that causes the sore throat, its proteins have to match up with the proteins on the back of your throat, and then it will infect those. And that's why it's usually centered around one specific area. And so that's how viruses get in. Usually they come in and then they land on a cell. They land on the cell, and then what they do is then they inject their RNA into the cell. And so then there's, of course, different viruses. And so then, do they have beautiful colors? Why do viruses have beautiful colors? Well, I really don't know what proteins look like, but I know that there's probably going to be, because there's so many different types of proteins that I'm sure these are pretty colorful. But I don't know. We should look into that. Okay, this is interesting. I looked it up. Virus particles are too small to have color. They're too small to have color. That's kind of a crazy concept. But then but we can take pictures of them, and then to make them more easily recognizable, they turn them different colors, kind of like what I did. Exactly what I did. Otherwise you might have, blue feet and a green nose and a yellow butt crack, And so, just like I colored it, so exact same way. That's why viruses have these different colors. Now, mind you, they're not living. They're not living critters. And so, it's just the DNA, it's just the genetic material. And so when this virus latches on, it automatically shoots its DNA into the cell. And then if you remember the cell, it has a thing called our cells have a thing called the ribosome, which makes proteins. So this injected DNA then gets read, and the message says, make more virus. So then your own cell starts producing more viruses, and more viruses, and more viruses, until you until, you know, you can have 10,000 viruses in there. And so how are they spread? Then these then kill this cell, and so then they all fled to the outside, and some of them, you know, because maybe we're talking about a sore throat, are shed off, and so then when you cough or sneeze or pick your nose and then touch the doorknob, then you're transferring the virus from your lungs into your mouth, onto your fingers, onto the doorknob. Then I do it, and then I open the door, and then I reach my hand in and get a gummy bear and eat it, and that's how the stuff is transferred. And that's how it's spread. And apparently there is 219 types of viruses that can infect humans. That was another one of the questions. And so that's how many, you know, can infect people. The question was actually how many viruses are in the United States. So there we go. That's how they get in. But then once they're in there, so now they're in there, but then your body also knows that it's attacked by a virus, right? So we've just been talking about the virus, how it goes in, it gets duplicated, it gets sneezed out, and it's spread. But what about the body? Because there's something equal that happens. And so the body, then it has a cell, and it has little receptors on there. And so then when this foreign object lands on it, then it's like, oh gosh, bad. And so then it does things like maybe secretes a hormone. That hormone goes in the blood, and that is to like have an immune response. And that's what causes an immune response. And so that's what happens to us. So when your body has an immune response, it wants to put up a fight. And that's when you start feeling sick. You know, because your body's, you know, producing all these blood cells and white blood cells, and that's when you're starting to feel bad, because your body's responding to the effect of these viruses. You know, your lymph nodes might get swollen and tender. That's when you get a fever maybe, and you just feel kind of junky. But then also, you know, you can look in the back of someone's throat and you can see physical damage to the back of the throat because these viruses have attacked it and killed these cells. You know, so you get these patches of where the viruses killed it, and so killed those cells. And so that's kind of the last bit on how viruses affect our body. All right, so kind of the next section was bacteria replication. Now, the bacteria, if you remember, so you have viruses, and then you have bacteria, and then you have cells like we have, which are specialized, you know, like the foot and the hand and the nose. And so then then you have a human, and then you have bacteria, and then you have this little virus guy over here. Alive, dead. This thing's just a piece of DNA or RNA, but it's just genetic material. This guy is alive. Bacteria, the bacteria in your gut, they need all the things that anything alive does. They need food, they poop, you know, they have to get rid of waste, you know, they have a metabolism, they use oxygen sometimes, you know, most of the time. So these guys are definitely alive. And so one of the questions was, how do bacteria replicate? So if you have a bacteria and it has its genetic code in here, what it's going to do is it's going to then double its genetic code when it replicates. And then what happens is then the cell starts to divide like this, and one goes to one side and one goes to the other side, and then eventually you end up with two daughter cells, each with a full set of DNA. So that's how they replicate. And so bacteria replication is when you double it. You go from 1 to 2, 2 then goes to 4. You know, so you have 4 of these little guys. And what is it and how does it work? And how is it supposed to work? That's how it's supposed to work, because they're passing on their genetic material. Because this bacteria might cause you to make yogurt, and then you might have another bacteria over here, and its job is to do something else. But they still replicate the same way. And so that's kind of cool. And so that's how it works. That's how they're passing on their genetic material. So this is a bacteria that only lives in a whale's mouth, and this is a bacteria that can survive in your nose, And so that's what bacterial replication is. And so then the last little bit was humans. And so can humans replicate themselves? So you have a human here with these specialized cells, right? Specialized cells all over the place. Can't see the black even though I just did it. Specialized cells all over the place. All these specialized cells all have the same genetic material. Genetic, how do you spell that? The same DNA. Each one has the same set of DNA, but the long chain of DNA, it just might have arm cell. And then this part might here be leg cell. And this one might here be foot, or whatever, And so then each one is read in the appropriate place, and that's why you end up with an arm cell where your arm is, and then it reads this one for your leg cell and this for your foot. And so all of your cells have all of the same genetic DNA. So can humans replicate themselves? You could. You could take the DNA out of any of your cells, and then if you could inject it in something else and have it read your DNA rather than whatever DNA you just extracted out, then it would make a duplicate. And that's where Dolly the sheep came from. And so that's what they did. They took some sheep DNA, put it in another one, and made a duplicate. And so they replicated Dolly, and so they could replicate humans. Another question, is that humans making more humans? Yes. But replication, that can be, boy and girl get together and have a baby. That's replication also. And so how does this function? And so, you have, like that little video showed, you end up with gametes, one from each parent, and then they come together to make a whole. So that is all I have.